Hey Pickleballers, and welcome to another episode of the PickleBros podcast. As always, thank you for your likes, comments, messages, and please share us around on all of your social medias. And again, shout out to Carbon Pickleball. Use code PickleBros at checkout for 10% off. Today's discussion is heavy mental, the inner game of pickleball. So it's going to be a lot of psychology going on today. But he's back. The man himself is back. Stolp, how you doing, my man? I'm going to hand it off to you. Tell the people what they want to know.
Oh my goodness. It is so good to be back with the bros on the PickleBros podcast. This has been, it's from being a fan from afar. It's just been so great to leave this in the capable hands of you three and just listening with smiles of the great content you put out. But yes, I am back. I'm 4 weeks as of today. Today is 4 weeks out post live liver donor surgery. And let me tell you something about that surgery. It is a major one. And so for about 4 weeks, and I'm still, to be completely transparent with everyone on this listening audience and viewing audience, I do one thing a day. I'm able to get out of bed for about an hour a day to move around, to go get a cup of coffee, to walk to the mailbox. This will be my one thing today, is the PickleBros podcast. So worth it. My energy levels go from like normal to zero pretty quick, and I guess that's what to expect when you're regrowing an internal organ. I don't know much about being a doctor, but that's what they said. But get this, they took 40% of my liver, took out my brother's bad liver, who has been diagnosed for 25 years with the ultra rare liver condition called alpha-1 antitrypsin, took out his liver, his gallbladder, his spleen. They took out 40% of my liver and my gallbladder, put the 40% of my good liver into my brother. And, tests have been showing since we did this 4 weeks ago. Mine is regrowing. My labs are not back to normal, but returning to normal. My brother has a little bit more of a complex recovery. So we did this surgery in Salt Lake City. He will remain out in Salt Lake City for, I'd say, another 2-3 weeks as his labs become back to normal. Some of his other internal organs were working on overdrive with the liver failing. So to be expected, but the overall summarized version is he is trending in the right direction. I am trending in the right direction, and I will be able to play pickleball, be back out on the course, probably another 4, 5, 6 weeks from right now. So they don't want me bending, lifting, twisting. They don't want me to risk ripping the ab wall or potentially getting a hernia. So I am still definitely in full recovery mode. And I will, like I said, I'll be in bed for the rest of the day after this, but so worth it to be here. I do want to show the listening and viewing audience. That's what you get when you get a liver or do a live liver donation, is a 16-inch scar, about 8-inch one way, 8-inch up, 8-inch to the hang a left, and you get that, or whatever the direction was. And so I'm going to be wearing that like a badge of honor. But it is so great to be back here and back with the boys. And so let's do this.
Absolutely. And our listeners won't have picked up on this, but our viewers will have. We have made these shirts, How My Pickle Bro Talks Strategy. Tim, there you go.
Yep. Oh, geez. It's doing all kinds of funny stuff.
And so this image actually is from Marco Polo. Jesse, do you want to? This was really you. Can you tell how we came up with this idea?
Yeah, I think I was trying to explain to Tim some key strategy points, and I got a little carried away.
And I'm scribbling. We laughed so hard about it that we were like, "This has to become a shirt." So everyone who's seen it likes it a lot. And just so all of our fans know, we are in the very early brainstorming stages of how we're going to get merch out there, because we keep getting asked for hats and for shirts. So we're investigating. I make no promises on the timeline, but it is something on our radar that we want to do for everybody. Now, we have not a condensed show today, but we've tossed a couple things out in terms of time. We don't want to exhaust Stolp here. His endurance is not what it used to be on the pickleball court, playing 7 days a week. Now he's going to give us a good hour here. So we're going to skip a couple things, but we still have to talk about DUPR. But this is not going to be your usual DUPR check. Many of you who do pay attention to DUPR will realize, as we have, that it is a complete disaster. It is all over the place. I'm of the theory that there are 3 or 4 different algorithms running for the players nationwide. Nothing makes sense. The new update is terrible. Jesse, Tim, I'll start with you. Do you have any initial thoughts on just the whole DUPR debacle that's going on?
Well, I can speak about it. It feels stupid to speak about it in any capacity because it's such a total disaster, like you said. But I did make an observation as we prepare to put the final nail in the coffin of DUPR as it concerns this show. I did make an observation. So we had been talking for the last couple of weeks. I don't know. It kept coming up. We were talking about our friend Craig, whose DUPR was massively deflated, and he reached out to DUPR with an email, and DUPR responded like, "Oh yeah, we'll fix that in a couple of days." Well, all right, they're working on it. They're going to fix it. This is great. They're so responsive to customer requests. Well, what they mean by that, and Craig had a 3.62, and he's very easily a 4.5 plus player. Very good player.
Yeah, definitely hedging upper 4s than 4.5s and lower 4.5s.
Yes, he's scary to look at the other from the other side of the net. Like he can do some damage to a really good player, right? He is a really good player. Just played him in the finals of a tournament this past weekend, which I'll get to. So he had a 3.62 when all this started, which massively deflated. So I reached out to DUPR, and DUPR responded, "Oh yeah, we'll take care of that." What they really mean by that is that they're not going to do anything because they think that, well, if he's really a 4.5 plus player, that'll take care of itself before long. He'll keep playing, these guys with the higher DUPRs than him, and he'll do well against them. And he's got all the odds in his favor. So his DUPR will magically creep up. We don't have to lift a finger unless it's the middle finger to everyone that he's playing against. That's what they're doing. So I ran into this on Sunday. We played a tournament, and I actually did well. I won the tournament. Me and Jason won the tournament. And there were a couple of guys in the medal round who we referred to last week as being viruses. They had deflated DUPRs. One of them I actually thought was inflated. I thought he was a 5.0, but maybe he's not quite to that level, and his match history would suggest that he's not. But he's definitely a 4.5 plus. But still, I thought that was an opportunity. Even Louis, his partner, thought that was going to be an opportunity for everyone they played against, right? Because he has an inflated DUPR. If you do well against that team, it's going to do well for your DUPR. It's going to do good things for your DUPR. Well, turns out afterwards, I'm looking to see how this tournament win affected my DUPR. They decided to give Louis' partner like a 3.8. So what this meant was we had him, we had Craig, who's rising. I mean, he's played a bunch of matches since he made that initial request through DUPR, and his DUPR has risen up to like right around 4.0 or something, or 4.1. Still massively deflated, but not as bad. He was in it. Jesse's DUPR is still screwed up. He was in the round robin, wreaking havoc, and so after all this, had a great tournament effort. Louis was joking, like, "Oh man, I wonder if Tim's DUPR is going to rise at all." Well, it did, 0.02. So if we're still caring about what our DUPR is in our little windows there, I guess I'm a 4.73, up 0.02 from last week. So,
yeah, and Jesse, before I ask you that same question and pass it over to you, another example from that tournament, my buddy Scott Fisher, good player, but still new to the game, went 6 of 7 for his losses, I should say. He had 6 losses of his 7 matches, and he went up nearly 0.8 DUPR points. So it's all over the place. It's weird and it's screwy.
Was his one win against Ben Johns by any chance?
Exactly. Jesse,
but yeah, I'm done, Jesse. What do you got? What do you have on this craziness?
It's gotten worse and worse. The more DUPR talks about how great their new enhancements are going to be, the worse the actual product gets. And just a little clarity on the Craig Duncan thing. He wasn't always a 3.6. I remember when he had a DUPR rating around 4 what was it, 4.5, 4.6, something like that. And then one day, I think he tried to create a new profile or something, and the data didn't import, and he dropped to 3.6. And for now 7 months, he's been trying to get that fixed. So there's these data integrity issues. The guy you played with, Tim, Jason Moeller, for months, he had been confused with somebody else named Jason Moeller, and so his DUPR was artificially deflated.
I forgot about that.
But that was back in the good old days when DUPR would actually try to fix these things. And I think they fixed his after it took a couple months, but they did ultimately fix it. And I back then I had plenty of complaints about DUPR, but now I look back on it as like the golden age of DUPR, when they actually, you could point out an error in the data and they would actually fix it. So, I mean, things have just gotten worse and worse. It's really bad. And so, we don't want to dignify DUPR by putting up our scores every week anymore, because we just don't really believe DUPR is a quality product anymore.
And Stolp, I know to kind of add fuel to this fire where we're banishing DUPR from our conversation, you had some wonderful stuff happen.
Well, here's the thing though, and so I was checking just because right before I went out on surgery, Jesse and I took silver in a really good tournament. And so they said they're going to be scraping the results from pickleball brackets and putting them in there. So I kept checking regularly and then understanding some of the new rules, how they were playing, like a win counts, I don't know, 0.05 you get no matter what. And there's no more is it static or whatever?
Dynamic.
Dynamic,
it's
static,
both.
it's whatever. So I left it at a 4.62, and then with the thinking that they might add some scores and it might change. Well, no scores have been added, and I've remained a 4.62 until this morning when I checked. And if we're talking about adding our little scores to the bubble, I'm now the highest rated PickleBro. So I'm all for. I'm a 4.7.
Yeah, Tim did that.
Tim did a double take.
Yeah, I know. I'm a 4.74, Tim. So I didn't win a tournament. I didn't, in fact, play a game over the last month and some change. And all these rules that they said, were once, this is the new world of DUPR. This is what you can come to expect. Totally not real, because all of a sudden I jumped by whatever point.
Your liver and your gallbladder were holding you back, and DUPR recognized
that's right.
that. So.
Yeah, there is a liver rating in there, in fact, so you actually get an extra, 1/10 of a point. So that's there.
A small pivot, but still on the topic. What is a tournament director to do about this? I know that Tim, I believe you were having a conversation with our local superstar at Lifetime, Aaliyah, who runs just the best tournaments I've ever been involved in, hands down. And she was like, why don't you share your conversation you had with her?
Well, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Aaliyah's son, who entered in all the scores from the tournament way more efficiently than PPA could ever do. So
and
good
more
for
accurately.
Him. More accurately too. Yeah. All the right people won according to him. So that's great.
With one 15 or 16-year-old kid can do more than PPA with its multi-million-dollar budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But yeah, in talking to Aaliyah about this, she's just trying to make everybody happy over there with all the tournaments that she's running. And she has heard it from everybody about how disappointed they are with what's happening with their DUPR ratings after her tournaments. Of course, she can't do anything about it, but she's wondering what the heck she's supposed to do. Does she use another rating system for this? Does she abandon the whole thing? I don't have any good answers for her, but it's so interesting. Like, this feels like if someone were to come around and take away your cell phone, like, you realize you were happier before cell phones, you were happier, but it just feels like you've grown so dependent on cell phones. It kind of feels like where we are with DUPR. I don't know if I can go back to pre-DUPR, but I know that I was happier pre-DUPR. I think maybe that's what we all have to do. I don't know.
Jesse, any thoughts on that?
I don't think WPR and UTPR are ready for prime time either, because those are based on sanctioned tournament results, and a lot of people don't play in sanctioned tournaments. And so, DUPR, in including non-sanctioned results, that's actually one of the nice things about DUPR. So if I were a tournament director, I would seed randomly.
Mm. I think of Steve Jobs when he was creating the iPod at first. He's like, if I can't get to a song in 2 clicks or less, it's not worth my time. Figure that out, developers. And so I think of WPR and UTPR. You have to log in. You got to click, clack around. I have no good way to even find that out. And I'm a high level pickleball player. DUPR has got that part figured out. They have an app. You open the thing up. It shows you a number. Like, that's the part that's working. It's really, really accessible. And so it's like, I think that is going to reign at the top of the mountain until, you know, something else comes out that's better. And to this point, there isn't, unfortunately. And that's why it is going to be the talk of the town every day of the week in pickleball.
Yep, absolutely.
Still, huh? Yeah.
Still. All right, guys, that's some really good stuff, but it's time to get on to the topic. Heavy mental. I'm punching my mic here. Heavy mental. The inner game of pickleball, the psychology of pickleball. And I want to start by discussing mental toughness. I asked the three of you to familiarize yourself with the one situation that has been consuming pickleballdom even more than DUPR is, and that is Anna Leigh Waters' behavior when she was eliminated by Tyra Black in singles while she was going for her 7th Triple Crown, which would have passed her for Ben Johns. She and Ben are each tied at 6. And when I watched her, let me just preface it by saying, I thought it was a little cringy. I would have preferred not to have seen her behave that way. But she gets a complete and utter pass from me. And I can go into defending my position. But Jesse, tell me, are you familiar with the situation?
Yeah, I saw the clip where she appeared to be exulting after her loss, and then she ran off the court with her hands in the air, and it was odd behavior that suggests she needs a little more experience dealing with failure.
Yeah. Tim, was that mental toughness? Do you think Anna Leigh is mentally tough?
She would absolutely have to be at this point. I mean, she doesn't just win with talent; she wins with mental toughness too. But I do think it probably felt like a weight off of her shoulders a little bit. It's okay to lose. Like, it feels kind of. I mean, I'm not going to suggest I have any idea how she was feeling. I can only speculate, but it probably felt like a little bit of a relief that all this pressure on her all the time. She wins every single time she's out there, whether it's mixed, women's or singles. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but it's basically accurate. She always
has
favored.
Over a 98% win rate.
Right. Everyone's rooting against her because it's more interesting to see her opponents win. So that's a lot of pressure. She's 16. She's a year older than my son. So I can only imagine, but that's a lot of pressure to be carrying around for a regular kid. She's a kid. So we can't put expectations on her for how she's going to react to things like this with that amount of stress. She hasn't processed things like an adult. So I give her a pass, 100%.
We, and by we, I mean me, huge Anna Leigh Waters fan, because at the Denver tournament, we got a shout out. She gave me a huge shout out to say, hey, get better, Stolp. It was like totally unexpected. And it was so cool that you guys who organized it, and Jesse and Michelle in particular, thank you so much. But anyway, she gave me a shout out, right? And so of course I'm an Anna Leigh Waters fan. I want you to think about when you were 16 years old. Do you know what you were doing? I was learning to drive stick shift, and I was pretty impressed I could do that. This person is winning at the highest level of pickleball over and over and over again. Her weekends are spent traveling the world or the country, playing in these tournaments. What were you doing? You were probably figuring out how to remember a girl's phone number or something like that. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, she has not experienced failure, number one. She's 16, number two. And the mental weight of all of the pressure of being number one in the world at your sport, there's so much to that. So I, pass or not, I'm like, what you just saw unfold on screen. Yeah, the announcers are like, what? That is a little bizarre. But I want you to put yourself in the shoes of you at 16 and what you're experiencing, and then try and put yourself in her shoes. Totally different thing. The cameras are on her at all times. The camera's never on us, right? Except for 1 hour of the week on the PickleBros podcast. And even that is a little bit daunting. I am so impressed with her mental capabilities to perform at a high level week in, week out. I don't care what people thought of it. If people thought that, oh, I can't take her seriously in this and that, like Annalie, you're still an amazing athlete to me. And that was when I saw that, I was like, she's got all the weight of the world, like Tim said, on her. And this is just you lose. Yeah, she probably doesn't understand how to do it, but she's experiencing it in real time in front of cameras.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't know how you guys were going to come out on this, but I assumed all 4 of us have daughters, and I transplanted my own daughters into that scenario, who, by the way, just absolutely love Annalie. They know her name. They want to become her one day, and I'm like, oh, pump the brakes, kids. She's a special type of alien, but at the same time, she's also a human being. So, she's going to grow from this, but she is undoubtedly mentally tough. And so what I kind of want to ask next is, how do you drill and or kind of prepare yourself for the mental rigors of, say, a tournament? Tim, I know that recently you felt that your mentality going into your, I'm going to spoiler alert, double gold medal weekend, you said you took a different approach, or maybe we're a little bit more focused. What can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I was sharing with you guys on Marco Polo on the way to the tournament, actually. It's just like, man, I'm sick of losing. I haven't won in a long time, it feels like. So, Ian, I'm going to hit you with another reference, pop culture reference. Have you ever seen A Christmas Story?
Is that where he loses the tire lug nuts? Oh, fudge.
Yes, that's it.
You'll shoot your eye out. I know that one.
Nice. All right. Well, there's the part he's super excited about this paper that he's writing because he thinks it's going to allow him to eventually get a BB gun for Christmas. He gets a C+ on the paper. He looks up, for some reason his teacher has turned into a witch, and then he's walking home. He's down in the dumps. He gets a snowball right in the face, right? And who is it? It's the bully Scott Marcus, right? And he's just laughing at him with his little crony, and they're just having fun at his expense, and everything is just piling on him. And
Randy lay there like a slug. It was his only defense.
That's it. You're right there. I'm so excited. You saw this movie.
I did.
All right.
It doesn't make up for not knowing Back to the Future. I'm sorry.
Boy. Not in the least, but we'll take what we can get. So he's sitting there. He's used to being afraid of this guy, and suddenly he's just had it. Like something pops, and he just goes and ignites and just explodes on this dude and just beats the crap out of him. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of moviedom. And I'm not saying I felt it quite to that extreme, but I got sick of losing. And there's something that happens. You just kind of lose all your fear and trepidation and nervousness, and you're just focused. Like you just want to win. You want to beat the bully, right? And that's kind of what I felt. And there's a point there in between matches. I had some easy-ish matches to start the tournament. And then I was sitting on the bench watching a match, and it was Nick versus Tim Shepard. And Tim's an up-and-coming player, and Nick's really good. And I was watching Tim do really well against Nick. And I knew that I was going to have to play both these guys pretty soon, but Tim was coming up. And I knew he'd be a tough test. And I was looking at him, and I felt the focus. Like I was just like I'm gonna take this kid down. I'm gonna take him down. Like I was so focused. I felt it, and I went out there and beat him 11-2. It was a really good match, but it was 11-2, and I just realized, man, I don't feel this way all the time when I play a tournament. I don't feel this way. There's something about this focus level and lack of fear that is really translating to wins in this tournament. And I won that tournament, and I just think there's something about. I was hungry. Like I wanted to come out and win. And that overrode any feelings of nervousness or just, nervousness that I may have felt otherwise. So I just think you feel one or the other, I think, more intensely. You feel that hunger to win, or you feel nervousness, like, oh, I hope I perform well. Just really quick, I want to hear Jesse's thoughts about being a good loser. But one thing about being a good loser is it gets you hungry for that next thing. It really does. And I think Without those losses that have been piling up, I don't know how I would have done. So I'm grateful for those losses.
Jesse, your comments on being a good loser. It ties in well with the Annalise conversation and Tim's question here.
Well, yeah, in tournaments, I didn't have that much experience losing this summer. I only lost a few matches, but I more than made up for it in this last tournament with not only with several losses, but some pretty stinging ones. One of which came at the hands of Tim and his partner. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's a great feeling, but I do think that those lows are what make the highs so satisfying. I also think that you can learn from your losses, and I try to do that.
Awesome. Stolp, I love how Tim, it was the first time I'd heard you say the phrasing, the lack of fear. And I think that's such a pivotal component. And learning from that experiences. Stolp, you've got a ton of sport acumen, sport experience. How is your approach when you're feeling weak or fearing fearful? What's your approach to be mentally sound?
Well, honestly, when it comes to pickleball, I reflect back on my times when I played minor league baseball and collegiate D1 baseball. There were a lot of eyes on me and a lot of pressure that came with that. There was, the pressure to perform in front of scouts. There was the pressure to perform in the minor leagues because there's 180 guys trying to get, take my job type thing, and every game mattered. So I think from a mental preparation standpoint, you only get that experience if you have that experience. And so I feel very, very lucky and fortunate to have some of those experiences where I've had 10,000, 20,000 eyes on me that have included high-level coaches, scouts, my teammates, the players that are my opponents. And I lean back on those experiences a lot. And so what I do in those times of like fear versus, and nervousness with it, I kind of take a step back and I get excited. This is pickleball. It's a very intense competition and sport. And that's what I love about it. However, we don't have these pressures, these external pressures where food is being taken off your table if you lose. And so it really puts that perspective in front of me to say, hey, how can I perform my best for me and my partner? And what do we need? And a lot of times what I've seen, momentum and confidence and all these non-physical traits go a very, very long way in pickleball, especially when you're playing against a partner if he's playing better than you at that time, you raise up to his level, or if he's playing below you at that time, you can help pick him up. So I lean on my experiences as my past professional sporting life to really say, there actually isn't that much pressure on me right now. I don't have to worry as much as I think I need to worry and just perform. So much so, Ian, that I get excited when there's pressure on me in tournaments. I get excited when there's eyes on me. I get excited when we get in these medal matches to say, hey, there's something on the line, because inside of my DNA, I love the ability or the opportunity to rise to an occasion. And that's just kind of who I am. And that was just, again, it provided the opportunity through baseball. So that's kind of my perspective when I'm on the pickleball court in these pressure-filled situations.
You know what I'm thinking right now? How much I missed you, dude. That's just so good. Like that constant positivity. I was missing that in my life. And you're so right. I mean, that's just so well said. And I don't even have a great transition onto the next thing, but it is sort of, it's applicable. It's the yips. And Jesse, you're the one who at least taught me this phrase. I'd never heard it before, but can you define yips real quick?
I think it's when you can't make an easy shot, like a serve, for example. It's a shot that's very standard that all of a sudden, for some reason, you struggle with it.
Yeah. Stolp, I'm going to come back to you. I'll let you drink your water there. But from baseball, again, you've shared some stuff with us about some of the most interesting, and we will talk about some pickleball yips and some examples from our friends, Soviet experience, but kind of give our listeners the same narration that you did with us about the baseball yips. It's so interesting.
You bet. Yeah, yips is a very, very normalized topic of conversation in the baseball world. And baseball is such a mental sport. I mean, think about it. If you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. That's just, you have to learn to be engulfed in failure to be successful at baseball. So, we're highly competitive, very athletic, and all these things that come in the sport of baseball. But it is a very, very mental game. So yips, where the routine becomes unroutine, is the way I like to think of it. And I've seen it in so many different ways, and I've actually experienced it myself. So there's been times where guys, if there's a runner on first base and you're the pitcher and you have to keep that guy close from stealing or don't want him to steal, you have to pick off. There is a process in there that some pitchers get that, oh my gosh, I forgot how to throw over to first base. So I've seen pickoff throws go 40 feet over the first baseman trying to pick somebody off. I've seen routine bunt plays that get hit back to pitchers 40 feet over the first baseman. They can't figure out how to throw the ball from the pitcher's mound to first base. So they'll run it over or walk it over and underhand toss it, or they will fire it as hard as they can at that first baseman just to, get that throwing motion, muscle memory taking over. I've seen that. I've seen double plays where guys get hit back the ball at the pitching mound and they have to throw it to second. So the act of turning around 180 degrees, throwing it off of the center field wall. I'm not joking. This is insane. I've seen that as well. I've seen catchers that have gotten the yips to where they cannot throw, so they throw the ball back, 200 times a game back to the pitcher, right? I've seen situations where catchers forget how to throw the ball back to a pitcher. And I'll never forget, in spring training, there's 8 mounds lined up so we're all working at the same time, practicing our pitches and bullpens. And there was a catcher that had the yips, and I was 2 mounds over. So think of a line. I was here. The pitcher and catcher that I'm talking about were here. This catcher, they were working on throwing it as hard as he could back to the pitcher to get it back to him. Well, he got up and threw it as hard as he could. He threw like a 95-mile-an-hour bullet that just wore my shin out. And I'm like, on day 3 of spring training, I'm like, dude, I'm trying to make a team here. Like, you can't be hitting me. But the yips infects the minds of the strongest people. My personal yips story is I had fear of warming up in a game with mounds that faced towards home plate and were on the field. So think about Wrigley Field, think about San Francisco, these mounds that you have to get loose as a pitcher, but if you overthrow the catcher, the whole game has to stop. Everyone's eyes are on you. So I would have this anxiety-ridden fear that if I do that, I'm it's going to be the end of the world. And so much so that I would just fake warm up and just a couple throws, I'm good, because I didn't want to interrupt the game. And that's where my head's at. I worked with sports psychologists in D1 baseball. They put us through sports psychology classes. They got professionals in front of us to help work through this, help talk through this, help breathing techniques to work through this. And I think I'll talk about it now. Being able to, in those moments, take a breath, choose a focal point, reset your mind, understand that you do this tens of thousands times a week to get you back to that right mind space. But we've seen it in pickleball. Jesse, I'll pass it off to you to kind of talk about what you've seen. But it's very, very real. And that's the baseball experience, right? Every sport has their own form of yips, and it is a very, very real deal. So much that psychology careers are made off of this, right? Sports psychologists have careers to work with athletes, professional athletes on this stuff. But Jesse, tell me when you've seen it on the court or if you've experienced it or what.
Yeah, I have seen it. 2 very good male players, both in the, I would say, mid 4-5 range, who could not serve the ball in consistently. And it was shocking to me. And I thought, wow, what's wrong with them? But then it happened to me earlier this year, the night before a DUPR Flex League match. I took Benadryl to help me sleep. And I'm convinced that the Benadryl affected me neurologically, because the next day I had a lot of trouble serving. And I think I ended up getting almost all my serves in, but they were very timid serves because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do it. In my warm up, I was missing like 1 out of every 3 shots. So it definitely exists. I got over it pretty quickly, but man, it sucked.
So you said it definitely exists. I will confess that I was very skeptical about whether yips actually existed or not. And I have a story that happened from what's today? Like 2 days ago of the yips. I wasn't me, but I saw it on the court. But before I tell that story, Tim, do you have any thoughts on the yips that you want to share?
Well, I think it was interesting what Jesse said about he made all of his serves, but they were kind of weak serves. And he calls that an example of yips, which I think is a good point because it made me think immediately of playing not to lose instead of playing to win. That you could argue is a form of the yips, is just, not being confident enough to go for your shots, just feeling really hesitant with every swing. I think that's, the ball might go in, but are you really going to win that point? Like, you're kind of hoping that your opponent makes a mistake or whatever. Maybe they have the yips worse than you do, but I think that's absolutely a form of the yips. I think that's a really interesting point. But I will say that for me, a lot of times you notice the yips the most on serves, but the one that drives me absolutely crazy is actually not a serve. It's in the soft game in the dinks. So many times I will alligator arm a dink and it'll go right into the net, and that is a yip for sure. And it just drives me crazy. It's my least favorite kind of miss in pickleball, and I think it's yip related for sure.
That's actually really good. You just triggered in my mind. I don't think I classified this as a yip for myself because it was short lived. But then on Friday, Justin Bruner and I will be playing together, and we hadn't played together before. So we played in this prize pool Moneyball tournament, and I started hot. So our friends Sean and Louie, who Justin and I were playing, started sending all the balls over towards Justin. And he absolutely rose to the occasion. He was kicking butt. We got up to a 9-6 outcome, and we're like, we got this. And Sean and Louie are dangerous players, great players. We're feeling really good about ourselves. And Justin, and they were going after him, and he was giving them back everything and more. And I remember the moment because I had the thought, Sean and Louie should probably come to me. I've been screened out for a while, and Justin is handling everything they're trying to do. And I remember Sean looking at me and then whispering over to Louie and pointing at me. And I went, oh no, they're going to start sending every ball my way.
He actually pointed?
Yeah. He kind of indicated like over there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, a pointed stare down.
That guy.
Yeah. He indicated that he was going to start changing what he was doing. And I just felt this, like my stomach got tight, and I was like, now I have to finish this game off because Justin's been doing such a good job. I end up missing 3 drops in a row, and we end up losing 11-9. And I didn't play well in the final legs of that match because I knew that they had transitioned over to me, and it got in my head. So I suppose I did experience the yips myself recently. But the story I really want to share, the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, and I've gotten permission from Jared to share this. It's the guy in the blue shirt behind you, Tim. Jared is a fantastic player. He's a little bit more, pendulum-y than us in his consistency, and he knows that. But when he is on, he is as dangerous as anyone, especially with his backhand attack. So he and Monty were playing Zane and I in our league match. And we were supposed to lose this match, but it ended up being very competitive. But what was strange is Jared missed about 40% of his serves in 2 games of 21. 4 out of 10 serves were misses. And when I say it was so bad, I thought he was trying out a new serve on Zane, trying to cut the corner shallow, like kind of by the kitchen corner. And because Zane was playing the right side, so when Jared would serve right to right, I thought he was trying to hit it really shallow and cut that corner. And so I said to Zane, he's trying to cut you there. Be ready to run up. And over again, Jared served it out, served it into the net, served it and then started serving it cross court into the other rectangle. And it got to the point some late in the first game that I yelled across from Jared, dude, are you trying a new serve? And then Zane yells at me, don't help him out with anything, which was kind of funny. But Jared later reveals to me that he had a shutdown mentally when it came to the serve, to the point where he was feeling anxious. He was worried he was going to have a panic attack over it, which even just escalates it and makes it worse. He said he was getting very emotional about it. And what was even more strange, he was playing lights out. His drops, his dinks, his knife fights. I mean, it was some of the better ball. Not the best ball I've ever seen him play, but he was by no means playing badly. Like, he was kicking butt, except for the serve. And it was as if every neural network in his brain that was responsible for getting the serve have just been severed. Like, it was the most bizarre thing. And so afterwards, he was talking, when he called me, he was like, I was so upset about that. And I was like, well, you held yourself together well. But it was in that moment that I realized yips are very real. It's completely about the mind. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how practiced you are, this thing can really get in your head and absolutely take over the most. And by the way, I think being a good server in pickleball is very challenging. But just getting the ball in play, even at the 3-0 level, I think it has to be the easiest thing in the game, right? To serve into that rectangle. And it ended up being the most difficult thing for Jared. And he missed probably 25 serves in those 2 games. And so what I want to then move us into from here, and this is what Jared admitted to, is that performance anxiety.
So really quick,
yeah,
I want because that's a very interesting story. And for we can say it's the easiest thing in the world, but when the routine becomes unroutine, like, then you start compounding in your mind, like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. The negative thoughts come into your head. And then all of a sudden, the easiest thing, what was once the easiest thing, now becomes the hardest thing. Put yourself in that situation. How would you get yourself out of it? And I'm going to offer some tips. Like, just think of, okay, it wasn't you in that situation, but if that was you, what would you do? And here, I'll offer up just some suggestions.
I'll go last because I know what the Jared solution actually was, but I'll go last.
Yeah. So here's what I think, because I've experienced some of those anxiety moments outside of pickleball. I gave you my baseball experiences. We have in pickleball that muscle memory. It takes tens, dozens, 60 hours is what I think the actual study is for you to change, behaviors, muscle memory wise. So we drill, we do all these things. The point is we have fundamentals figured out with our muscle memory. So in those times of like, oh my gosh, I forgot how to do these things. What do? This is what I did in baseball, and I alluded to it earlier. So before every match, before every game I pitched in, I would look around and find what I would call a focal point, a reset point. So, look around and find something that's a little bit odd. So like the little pickleball logo and Lifetime Pickleball for me is what it is. And when things start going out of whack, I would take a small mental pause, whether it's between points, whether it was a real timeout, and I would visit that focal point with my eyes, which was a mental reset for me to say, what are we doing? Let's think about what we're doing. Know that we have the foundational fundamentals underneath us and the muscle memory to take over. Take a deep breath. Breathing is so critical, fellas. Like, if you do not breathe during any sort of anxious moment, you're not getting oxygen to your brain. You're not allowing your brain to do what it's meant to do, and that is to think. And so finding a focal point, taking some deep breaths, having some breathing techniques that you work on behind the scenes as part of your mental training. And then when those anxious moments come up, do that. Call the timeout, find your focal point, do your breathing exercises, mentally reset, and get back to center. Do something that's back to routine. That's what I would offer up as a suggestion to anyone out there who heard Ian's story and said, you know what, that's actually happened to me. Find a focal point, find a mental reset, work on some breathing, and just start over.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding that focal point. Tim, do you have any thoughts on our story about our buddy Jared?
Yeah, the focal point that Stolp was just talking about reminded me of the totem idea from Inception. Like just having something that you can focus on that helps you remember where you are, almost. I've never experienced anything like that, what you described from our buddy Jared. But I can say that I don't have very much to offer in this department. I don't know. There are times where I just fail to show up mentally. Most recently, Jesse, we were playing against you and Mike Lee, I believe. And it was, I think, me and Jeff Ma on one of those Thursday morning round robin things that we did. And I came out, I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. I couldn't do anything right. And I don't know how to get out of those situations. I think for me, you just can't show up that way. Like you have to prepare and show up with the right mentality in the first place, knowing that that's a danger in the first place. Because once I find myself in those situations, I don't know what to do. I feel everybody looking at me. It's compounding. It's making everything worse. Everyone knows that Tim's out of sync. Now they have to say something or not say something. I'll notice them not saying something. I'll notice them saying something. It's going to make everything worse. So I just want to avoid that situation altogether. It would be really great if I could get with Stolp and get some pointers about how to deal with that. And he gave some really cool stuff right there. But that is not my strength. I just have to prepare ahead of time because I know that it'll be a disaster if it happens.
Tim, you said you had this moment on the bench where you're like, I'm sick of losing. And you were hungry for a win, and you channeled something inside of you to say that's not going to happen. So like what I would challenge you on is like, how did you get there? And how can you revisit that moment to show up every day with that same mentality? Because something you did internally clicked into a winning mentality and you never looked back from that second on. You know, it would be really cool to have that every time you stepped out onto the court, and you already are a monster. But if you could control that mental game to have that killer instinct and focus and drive, maybe that's your version of, you know, the totem, right? Like, hey, where are you right now? I'm spinning this top from Inception, and then all of a sudden, I'm locked in. I'm locked into what I'm doing, and then you're a killer.
Yeah. So there is something that I do to make sure that I show up in the right frame of mind, and I'm going to relate it to some advice that I gave a loved one. So this person had a really hard time with social anxiety at big gatherings. And I related to a lot of it. And my advice that I gave him was, look, so many times we don't look forward to these kinds of things. We have to do them like with work and other kinds of situations. You know, we have to go into environments where there's a lot of people. There's not really an objective. You're just sort of walking around talking and trying to not look stupid, right? And I told him, look, if your only objective is to show up and check that box, you're going to fail every single time. You're not going to accomplish anything. And you're going to feel the exact same way the next time you have to go do one of these things. And so I told him, have a plan, like show up. And like the plan is not just arriving at this thing and being there in a physical sense. You need to have a plan. What are you trying to accomplish at this place? Like, who are you trying to talk to? You know, do you have some things that you can say? You know, how are you trying to look? What is your face going to look like? You know, what are you trying to project? Have a plan so that you can feel good and have it be sort of a mission. But like, I'm going to accomplish something here. And I think that's a great approach to have in sports too. And in pickleball is you don't just show up. Like I can tell you, I've never won a tournament where my attitude was, well, I just got to show up and see what happens. I've never won a tournament that way. I've won tournaments being super driven, super focused, super confident, super excited. I had a game plan. I knew who I was playing against. I knew what I was going to do against those guys. I talked to my partner. We talked strategy together. It's not thinking about how you're doing. It's thinking about what you're doing. And that has always paid off for me.
That's really good stuff. Sensei, A lot of things have been said. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, in terms of attitude, the partner that I most enjoyed playing with this summer, other than Stolp, because Stolp was my favorite, was Mike Lee. And Mike Lee, as you know, has a very sort of light, humorous demeanor, and the positivity really rubbed off on me. And I think for someone like me who's prone to some performance anxiety, that being around that and absorbing some of that was very helpful. I mean, he was so much fun that even some of our stone-faced opponents had to crack up laughing at his jokes, which was pretty cool. So I really I aspire to be like that when I compete. And then in terms of some practical suggestions for any of our listeners who are dealing with the yips, I would suggest on a serve that you develop a couple of different serves. So maybe you have one, standard volley forehand serve. Maybe you have a drop serve that you can go to as well, or a backhand serve. And knowing that you have these other options in the bag should lower your anxiety and help you do your top choice of a serve.
Excellent. And I love that you brought Mike Lee into it, because the partner, is how Jared got out of it. And this is where I need to shout out Monty Murdoch, our buddy. We've only recently met him in the last couple months. Great player. He was so great next to Jared, being positive, encouraging, never once showed any outward sign of frustration. Later on in his head, he did reveal to me, he was like, what is going on? I don't understand. but even Jared was in that mindset too, right? I mean, and so were my brother and I. Nobody knew what was going on, but he was just being encouraging. And he told Jared, just change it up, just do a drop serve. Jared's never done a drop serve in his life. And so Monty encouraged him to completely deviate from anything he's used to. And from that point on, that was about middle of the second game. Jared didn't miss a serve after that, right? And so, I mean, all the damage had been done psychologically at that point, but at least they were no longer going, one serve on every single side out. So when you talk about Mike Lee being positive, I think being a good partner, and we've had these discussions before on the podcast about what it means to be a good partner. That is so important when your partner is struggling, having the yips, feeling some anxiety. The single most important aspect for me, in my mind, of calming down is having a partner who can calm you down and be supportive and be encouraging and let you know it's all okay. And yes, they see what's going on, and it's not okay. It's not good, but they're fine with it. So I think that is so important. Tim, I want to kind of close out our conversation today. You prepped me with fear versus hunger. I didn't really know what you meant by that, so I'm going to pass it over to you if you remember the point you wanted to make at that time. Well, you're struggling how you view pickleball, the fear versus the hunger of it.
Oh, well, it's kind of like what I was saying before about just what kind of attitude you show up at a tournament with. Like, are you more focused about how you do, or is your mindset about what you're trying to do, like what your objective is, what kind of strategy you're trying to carry out, and are you sick of losing? Like, has that inspired a Ralphie reflex about, I'm going to go beat up the bully? Like, if that's how you're feeling, there's no way you're going to succumb to fear. Like, you're feeling that hunger instead. And even if you fail, even if you lose in that regard, like, I swear the biggest fear that people have on the pickleball court, I think, is just not being able to perform. Like, you might lose. Like, I've said this before, I lose to Louis in singles all the time because he's freaking awesome. But I don't get mad at myself. I don't get discouraged or anything. Sometimes they're just too good, and those are good losses. There's nothing wrong with that. We can always train and get better and study the game, work on things. But if you lose to a better player, lose to a better player. What you don't want to do is go out there and suffer the yips or suffer extreme anxiety and question yourself every step of the way. You just want to show up and be the best version of yourself possible. So I guess that's what I'm talking about with hunger over fear.
Awesome. Stolp, I'm going to reel you in here, brother. You mentioned to us that your perspective on pickleball has been significantly altered due to your hiatus and the surgery. Can you speak on that as our final closing thoughts here?
I totally would love to. I think today's conversation has been so valuable because there's some practical tips you can take away if you are, dealing with some mental issues in the game. But, over the past 4 weeks and, looking forward to the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, I'll still be out from playing pickleball. And I know a lot of folks out there and us on this screen suffer some burnout. I mean, we have struggles with DUPR. We have some issues with our mentality. We play a lot of tournaments. We play a lot of rec play. It's like, oh, this is so much. Am I getting burnt out? Do I have an on season versus off season? And that might be a different conversation for a different time. But I can just tell you from my perch and sitting back and watching a bunch of pickleball and listening to these conversations, what we have in the sport of pickleball is so truly special. We have a community of people who care about us. I've seen that reflected in so many conversations, texts, outpouring of gifts. Like, I have truly been touched in ways just from people far and wide across this country, just truly are concerned and care about me. And that was because of the sport of pickleball. I don't think we realize what a great gift we have in this game until it's taken away from you. And I've been sitting on the sidelines for the last 4 weeks and just pondering day in, day out of how grateful I am for this community, for this game, for this competition, for what it brings to my life, to my family, to my positive outlook on anything I do. And it took me to voluntarily step away from that for a couple of months to realize and be thankful, for what we have in this game and the people around it. And so much so that it truly does help impact my recovery as I recover from this major surgery that I've gone through. And a wise person once told me, and I have this quote in front of me in my office. It says, oh, it's a little blurry, but I'll read it for you. Just trust that it says this. It says, having a community of people who love and support you helps deeply to improve your recovery. And you can see, the quote is from science. It's actually it's from science. I can trust me when I tell you that's a real thing. I wonder if I can, whatever, show it. There it is. Okay, here, I got my sign. So see, it's a trusted or having a community of people who love and support you helps deeply to improve recovery. That's from science, straight up. And I can tell you this, I was surrounded by 30 or 40 people over the weekend when I got to see you all and just wrapped around the community. I got a big community hug from everybody, and it was stronger than any medicine that I've been prescribed during this entire time. And I can tell you the community of pickleball is so important. It means so much. And you only get to see that when you're not a part of it. And the last 4 weeks have really shown me that. And you guys are so big to help for my recovery. So just know that it's a scientific fact. I'm going to put this in front of my face before I break down. But I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for this game. I'm thankful for you all. And thanks for all this.
You're a beautiful man.
We love you, Stolp.
Love you, dude. I can think of no better way than to wrap the show with that. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the PickleBros podcast. Please share this episode around. It will tug on your heartstrings and perhaps help your partner who might be struck with the yips. So share us, follow us on all of your podcasting platforms. We love you all. Stay safe and stay out of the kitchen.